In honor of Juneteenth this Sunday, we continue to highlight grassroots efforts to reclaim African American burial grounds. We've been following our friend and former producer, Howard University's own Rodney Hawkins and his family and their efforts to recover their ancestral cemetery in East Texas. Well, the family recently returned for an annual cleanup. And this morning, Hawkins introduces us to a woman trying to get recognition for one of the largest African American burial grounds in the country.
From the stately buildings to the centuries-old cemeteries, history is on full display in Richmond, Virginia, except here. Beneath this highway, under this abandoned gas station and overgrown lawn, is one of the largest African American cemeteries in the country, Shockoe Hill African Burying Ground. But you couldn't tell.
These people have been forgotten. They've been made invisible, and they're being treated as if they never existed at all.
Lenora McQueen is a genealogist who traced her great-great-great-great-grandmother's grave to this site.
No marble tells where Kitty Carey sleeps, only a simple slab of painted pine.
Using documents like this poem from 1866.
For Kitty Carey lived and died a slave.
Over 22,000 free and enslaved African Americans were buried here, starting in 1816. This graveyard expanded to 31 acres.
When you drive past, 22,000 people are buried here.
When they drive down this street, they're driving over it. They re-extend the street in about 1883. And bones and bodies, it's in the city council records, bones and bodies are used as fill in the street and left sticking out of the ground.
That has to hurt.
It does, very much. It's appalling.
It took you years to find your ancestor. And to end that search with this?
Yes, I'm sorry. It was horribly gut-wrenching. If I didn't laugh about it, I would cry.
Next to the African burial ground sit two nationally registered cemeteries for the Jewish and white communities, officially marked and well-maintained. It's a stark contrast.
This isn't by accident. The white authorities during Jim Crow segregation didn't have any interest in African American graves.
McQueen turned to Ryan Smith, history professor and author, for help.
There was also an effort to build up the history of the Confederacy. Just as the bridge behind us was being built in the late 1880s, the foundations for the Robert E. Lee Monument were being set.
How do we use history to change a nation, to make us better?
Lonnie Bunch is secretary of the Smithsonian Institution.
Why are African American burial grounds so important, not just to African Americans, but to American history?
You can tell a great deal about a nation by what it remembers, by what it celebrates in its museums, by what it builds monuments to, and often what is neglected is African American, and especially African American cemeteries.
He is pushing for legislation to create a national registry for African American burial grounds.
I think this register could make connections, could allow people to know their history better and to honor that history by remembering.
I know the power of these connections firsthand. 1 year ago, our efforts to restore my family's cemetery allowed researchers to identify my enslaved great-great-great-grandfather.
Despite this being a document that shows my ancestor as an asset, it still documents that he existed.
You realize that you are not isolated. You're from tradition, families, and that should give you inspiration as you live your own life.
For most of her life, she was enslaved on the Morven plantation.
Inspired by her ancestor, McQueen has been pushing for years to get recognition for the Shockoe Hill African Burying Ground, starting with a historic marker. The graveyard has been added to the state landmarks register.
How does it feel to come this far?
It's kind of bittersweet because I know there's still a long way to go. This place is still very much threatened.
The National Register is next on her list. Her goal is to honor her ancestor and others buried here so they may truly rest in peace.
What do you think your ancestor would say to you?
It's about time.
For CBS Mornings, Rodney Hawkins, Richmond, Virginia.
It's about time. What took you so long?
Yeah, I commend her for her efforts.
Oh, absolutely. I was having a conversation about this very thing, priorities.
Yep.
And where do you place your priorities in terms of who you honor and who you respect? And this is a brilliant example of it.
If our history isn't preserved properly, it can fade into obscurity.
Absolutely.
And this is a case where she has done her job to help preserve our history.
Tell your story.
That's
Tell
right.
your story.